rolling.
Good. Welcome, everyone. Here we are. It's late spring, and we're rolling through the Broadband Breakthrough program. Today, of course, is a critical day when we talk about funding. And so we'll get set for a couple good presentations there. We're still waiting for Devin Bronstein to come on. And there she is. So good. So, hi, Devin. We're going to let Nancy talk just for a minute about where we are in the survey process, because we're rapidly coming to the close date on the survey. So go ahead, Nancy.
Thanks, Bill. Just great job, everybody. We've got, of course, all 6 counties who have done some intense distribution. You did a really good job out the gate with your convenient sampling, and now cluster sampling. On Monday evening, your contacts, your main point of contacts for your surveys, received a map of coverage. Those are points on a map that have been surveyed, and also a breakdown of the types of respondents: businesses versus farms versus residential versus community public buildings, or what we call community anchor institutions as well. We keep that a little bit broad so that any sort of community building you have in mind can take that survey and indicate that it's a community asset. And of course, the overall count, and you all are doing pretty well. And so if you have any questions about that, let me know. Otherwise, we have 3 days of just full surveying left. We'll close that on Friday. I will actually export the data on Monday morning. And so if there is any sort of last minute thing that needs to happen over the weekend, so unofficially, right, you still have the weekend, and I will be exporting that on Monday morning. You can put any questions in the chat, but just great work, everyone. This is a key component of the program, and you all did a wonderful job.
Thanks, Nancy. And just to emphasize, if you're not happy with your survey response list, if you want to keep that open, that's okay to do that. But the survey report data you'll get here as a part of Breakthrough, well, that survey window, the only data that'll be included will go through this weekend. So
absolutely, yep.
If you want to make another push, we've had other communities keep it open even as long as a big push, a back to school push next fall. Just see where you are with the survey results and the need for additional respondents. If you're working to try and work with a provider and convince them the marketplace is there, that might be a good thing. If you're kind of set with a provider partner and your list, that's good there. So that'll be up to you guys.
Yeah, and I will have a recommendation section when I give you your results, and you'll see on that I might recommend you keep it open, and that we can redo results if you need more responses in a certain type of respondent or just more overall responses. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Nancy. They say nothing happens till somebody buys something, and in broadband, nothing happens until grant funds are issued. So we're going to talk a lot about grant programs today, both at the state and federal level, and now with BEAD, we're intermingled between state and federal. Devin, I want to introduce you and welcome you. This is your first presentation, I think, to a Broadband Breakthrough meeting, acting director of the Office of Broadband. So congratulations on your appointment. Good luck, I would say, and welcome today. So take it away.
Great, thanks so much. Really excited to be here. I know lots of members of the Office of Broadband and the Broadband Lab meet with you all weekly, sometimes bi-weekly, and I've heard really great things about this community. So amazing program, really excited to be here. Before I get started, I would love, maybe Bill or someone could just share a little overview of kind of like who's in the room, who are the counties in this cohort, and like what folks know to date about BEAD at a high level, so I don't get too duplicative here.
Okay, sure. And so there's 6 counties in our program, and so I don't lose any of them on my list here. although I'm down to one cohort of communities now, so I should be able to do this. But we've got Boone County, and they're doing a great job. Johnson County, Lawrence, Lee, Massac, and Vermilion.
Okay,
So
wonderful.
we've got kind of 2 in the north and 2 on the east and 2 in the south.
Okay, great.
And then this is, I think, week, where am I here? I'll look at that, week 11. And so this is, we've just got 2 more weeks of community present or expert presentations coming. They've heard about partnerships. They've heard about feasibility studies. They've had multiple sessions on fiber and wireless, and so we really want to focus today on kind of positioning themselves to attract the funding and kind of what the plan is for getting the money out the door with BEAD.
Sounds good. All right. Well, I'll take it away. And if there are questions along the way, feel free to stop me or we can do so afterwards. But with that, I will share some slides. So again, thank you for having me. And I'll be giving a walkthrough of a couple of overviews. So first, this may be review, but would love to just share kind of who we are as the broadband office, our team, where we fit into the puzzle, a little bit of a recap on our work around digital equity and Connect Illinois to date. Then we'll dive into BEAD. What is it? What are the main steps? And then looking forward, what's the main process? What can you do now? And I know folks have, heard things about RDOF and how this might impact BEAD. So I wanted to do my best to at least kind of give the basic overview on kind of what's what with that. And then we'll talk about next steps moving forward. So the Office of Broadband sits within the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, which is a state agency under Governor Pritzker. Our office is mostly separated into 2 main buckets of work. We have our grants management team, which has been growing given all of the exciting grants opportunities coming our way this year. We also have a community engagement team who I'm sure you all have met. Their focus is building relationships with stakeholders around the state, trying to demystify, some of these more complex broadband rules, programs, and policies, and make sure that all of you and folks around the state are aware of these programs and how to participate. The office was founded in 2019, just 2 people, and now has grown to, I think, 11 people, and is going to be growing even more in the coming couple of months. The main sort of tasks of our office to date have been Connect Illinois, which is the broadband infrastructure program, sort of pre-BEAD, pre-Infrastructure Act. And we've also done lots of mapping and digital equity work. And looking forward, of course, BEAD and the Digital Equity Act will be some of our main areas of focus. You'll see on the right, the Illinois Broadband Lab is our immensely important partnership with the University of Illinois system. Just a couple of ways that we work with the University of Illinois. Broadband Breakthrough is, of course, one of them. We also have a statewide digital navigator network, lots of dashboard, maps, data, and more. So I know folks here are very interested in infrastructure, but I would be remiss if I didn't get a chance to just give a quick plug for the digital equity work happening and coming down the pike, since it is really all tied together. So the Digital Equity Act was passed as part of the infrastructure bill along with BEAD. And the goal here is, in addition to making sure there's that physical infrastructure access to everyone's door, how do we make sure that community members have the tools, the confidence, the devices that they need to use that internet to meet their full potential, whether that's applying to jobs, working from home, participating in remote learning, just having fun online. So the first kind of order of business was to publish a state digital equity plan, or SDEP. So every state was required to publish one of these plans, kind of following a series of requirements. So Illinois spent several months last year going around having conversations and workshops with stakeholders across the state. They did a big survey, a phone survey, to make sure that we're reaching folks who may not have internet connection at home. And so all of this resulted in a digital equity plan. After public comment period and some back and forth with the federal government, Our plan was approved on April 10th. So you can find that online, take a look. We have executive summaries available for those who don't want to read 200 pages. And what I highlighted here is the core activities. So this is kind of going to drive the next steps of implementing this plan. So outside of BEAD, there is this other tranche of funding called the Digital Equity Act. And what our eyes are on right now is called the Digital Equity Capacity Grant. So this is funding that goes towards states who submit and get approved for their digital equity plans. And it's funding that goes towards implementing our plan over the next 5 years. So we got this first allocation of more than 23 million, and we'll get 2 more allocations over the next 3 years. We'll be applying for these funds by the end of the month, and then hope to start implementing in August and September. So a little snapshot into what's next, what to expect. And I think this is really important because, you know, as the state, we can't be everywhere all at once. And so it's really important to be spreading the word to partners like yourselves who do have the ear of community members on the ground and of nonprofits, smaller organizations who will be charged with implementing these programs because, you know, you all have that trust and relationships with those most impacted. So a couple of highlights here. We've kicked off a co-creation process. Before we officially launch a statewide digital equity grant program, we want to hear from the folks who we anticipate applying for it. So, you know, it's not crafted behind closed doors, but rather crafted in partnership with people who are going to be ultimately benefiting from it. And so I think we're looking for a way to perhaps bring some of the breakthrough folks together to weigh in on this. So maybe stay tuned for that. We'll also be having a series of grant capacity building workshops starting in late May, kind of trying to demystify the grant application process, more on the digital equity side, so geared towards like nonprofits and local governments, but things like how to make sure you're eligible. You may be familiar with the system called GATA, how to make sure you're up on your audits, things like that, as well as how to write a strong grant application and how to build a strong digital inclusion program. Looking forward, we'll have technical assistance throughout the grant application process. We'll be expanding our network of digital navigators, and we'll be designing and then rolling out the state digital equity dashboard. So I know a big activity as part of the Breakthrough program is surveying, collecting data, and like understanding the data landscape or the landscape of your community using data. So the goal for this dashboard is to equip every community with that ability to kind of understand where they are in the process, understand their gaps to closing the divide, and then being able to use and harness that data to tell their story, be empowered, talk to funders, track progress, all of those things. And the capacity building workshops for grants. So we have a registration link here. We're working with Nancy at the extension on these. So if this is something of interest to you or you want to put this out to nonprofits in your community, we will send along this link. We also hope to, while we're starting with webinars, we will be getting out into the community, particularly, you know, in the central and southern regions. So look out for those opportunities for input, in-person working sessions as well. All right, so folks may be familiar with Connect Illinois, but this was kind of the original broadband infrastructure grant program initiated by the Office of Broadband in 2019. So we are on our 3rd round of applications and awards. This slide just kind of shows a little recap of that. You can apply in 3 categories: broadband access, innovation, or urban broadband. And we've received applications from internet service providers, but also county governments in partnership with an ISP. The applications are rolling, so there have been some awardees announced, but we are actually still accepting applications through July 1st. So if this has been on your radar, you know, we encourage you to apply. And this is a summary of projects funded and in progress so far. You can see on the right-hand side map, kind of all around the state scattered. All right, so moving on to BEAD. I like to include this slide just to show all of the things happening right now all at once. If it seems confusing, it's because there truly is a lot happening. So I'm hoping that this will break it down a little bit. So the two sort of federal grant programs that we're kicking off really right now are the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, BEAD, and the Digital Equity Act. So BEAD will start with our sort of challenge process, some planning, working with NTIA to write our initial proposals that actually dictate how we'll roll out this grant program. So that's kind of the stage that we're in right now. We've gone back and forth with feedback from NTIA and are implementing that and hoping for approval soon. Once the challenge process is over and we receive that NTIA approval and we feel ready, we'll be kicking off a sub-grantee process likely later this summer or early fall. And we'll have 365 days to run that full process, select sub-grantees, and then kick off an additional 4 years of broadband deployment. I'll talk more about that in the presentation. Digital Equity Act, a little more straightforward. We got our plan approved and now we're applying for our funds. Once we have that, we'll kick off our own grant program and start implementing our digital equity plan. Outside of that, we have all of our existing programs, so ongoing engagement related to regional engagement, convenings, bringing folks into the know about opportunities, and then continuing with existing programs like Connect Illinois, rounds 1 through 3, and the Digital Equity Capacity Kickstarter Grant. So this is a picture of broadband service availability in Illinois as of our current data. You may be familiar with kind of how eligibility for the BEAD program is defined, and this is based on, again, the federal statute. So we're required to follow this definition. So any location that is unserved by broadband, meaning it does not have access to 25/3 megabits per second, we are required to cover through the BEAD program. It is first in line. So you can see the latest map here, 107,000 roughly unserved locations, all the pink on the map. Then we have underserved locations. These are second in line. This is the blue on the map. And then served locations. These are locations that either do have access to 100/20 megabits per second, or they will based on an enforceable commitment. So either a federal grant program or a state grant program has already kind of committed to connecting those areas. A huge disclaimer is that this does not yet incorporate the results of the challenge process. And so I'll talk about that in a second, but really nothing is final until we finish the challenge process, receive approval from the federal government, and then we'll publish that final map. This slide shows the very high level stages of BEAD. So last year, we published a 5-year action plan that kind of goes through all of these steps. So if you want a sneak preview of what we were thinking back last summer, that's a great document to check out. Then there was a really important NTIA requirement to submit an initial proposal. There are 2 volumes of this. The first one described how we would go about the challenge process. The second described how we would go about the sub-grantee process. We have approval on the first one. The second one, we are awaiting approval. The challenge process is what we've been going through since February. That wraps up on June 18th. This was the opportunity for nonprofits, local governments, and internet service providers to weigh in on the BAP as it currently stands and challenge, dispute the current state as we know it based on evidence or their experience. So we are currently in the final adjudication phase. And again, I'll go into more detail in a second. We just launched a request for input process, so really geared towards either providers or those kind of with the technical mapping experience to look at how we're proposing or thinking about breaking up the state for those grant applications and offering initial feedback. So we make sure that, again, by the time we roll this out, it makes sense and people will want to participate. Sub-grantee selection, self-explanatory. We'll put out a notice of funding opportunity and eligible providers, co-ops, utilities, local governments can apply to get funding to implement their broadband service. And then we'll submit all of our final proposal information with the subgrantees that we've provisionally selected to the federal government for their sign off. And then we can implement. So it's a long road. There's a lot of requirements, but we are making our way. I've talked a lot about the challenge process. I know that probably a handful of people in this virtual room have been engaged, but just to give an overview, the purpose of the challenge process is to make sure that our broadband map is as accurate as it can be. Historically, states have not had an opportunity to edit our own broadband maps. So we've been fully reliant on the federal government. Historically, the federal government, the FCC, has been reliant on what internet service providers report. There was a shift to be a federal challenge process where folks could submit challenges to the federal map. And now that process has kind of come to the states. So we not only have the opportunity to make revisions based on challenges from nonprofits, local governments, and providers, but we can also add in community anchor institutions that may not have been reflected on that first map. So schools, libraries, certain nonprofits, affordable housing, community centers, things like that. Who can submit challenges? So again, the challenge phase has closed. So this is a little bit just reflective for your knowledge. But we receive challenges from local governments, nonprofit organizations, and internet service providers. And then we also had an opportunity for individual residents to submit speed tests that were then submitted by a nonprofit to us. So we wanted to make it as accessible as possible. And so we had, I think, over 1,000 speed tests submitted, which was really great. What can be challenged? So any location on the map could be challenged, meaning, I know that this location, or I live here and I know that I don't have access to the broadband service reflected on the map. And I'm going to collect evidence of, the provider on their website or via a documented phone call saying, sorry, we actually can't provide 100 over 20 to your address. So this sort of evidence was submitted to the office. We had a series of reviewers reviewing it. And then all of those outcomes have been posted online on the challenge dashboard, which I'm also happy to share a link to. So you could challenge availability, is broadband there or not, speed, latency, the technology type, lots of things like that. So the challenge process opened on February 20th. Then there's a series of interim phases. We are currently in the final adjudication phase, looking at all the evidence received and our understanding of the broadband landscape to make sure that, we are doing all we can to be really fair and also make sure that this map is as accurate as possible, because the last thing we want is for any communities to get left behind by the BEAD process. So looking ahead, what's next? This kind of is a high-level overview of the sub-grantee process. So almost think of it as like a double click into that sub-grantee chevron I shared earlier. The first step is pre-qualifications. So we know that federal and state grant programs are not easy to participate in. And so we want to work with folks like long before we open the grant process to get them pre-qualified. So submitting the relevant materials that they need to show that, okay, you have the sort of capacity, experience, team, financials needed to go after these funds. And then we'll have 3 waves as a part of the grant process. And this is to make sure that we're prioritizing the hardest to serve, almost least desirable locations. So again, that they don't get left behind. And then we'll refine the sub-grantees throughout the 3 waves. We also don't want to create a hard deadline that rushes folks to apply, because, I think it's important to let, potential like new market players or folks who are still getting their materials together to apply when it makes sense for them, hence the sort of rolling deadline. So a little more details. Wave 1 will focus on those hard to serve areas. So basically, to apply for to serve an area in wave 1 will require that you include a hard to serve area. And hard to serve will kind of be defined before this is live, but think about, locations far apart from each other, more expensive to cover, things like that. Then in wave 2, we'll say, okay, we have these hard to serve locations covered. Let's open it up to the rest of the locations. And then wave 3 is kind of the final negotiation. So maybe no one showed interest in certain areas during waves 1 and wave 2. We might have some back and forth to incentivize, applicants to cover every single locations. So I know that was a lot. I'm gonna kind of focus on what you can do now, and then happy to take questions and dig into anything more deeply. So as of yesterday, there is a request for input opportunity open. I will say this is kind of like a technical ask. And so if you have mapping GIS folks on your team, or you already know that you're supporting a provider in the BEAD process, they would likely be the ones to participate in this. But I'll give a little overview. So we have worked with data scientists and experts in the field to identify the most efficient way to essentially offer up locations on the map during the subgrantee process. And where we've landed is they're called PAUs, or project area units. So PAUs are a collection of unserved and underserved locations eligible for BEAD inclusion, known as the building blocks within an application. So they're kind of a series of clusters almost of locations that an applicant could take and say, I want this series of PAUs and I'm going to apply for it. So they can't be broken down into a smaller collection of unserved and underserved locations. They don't overlap, so they're kind of mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. And they collectively contain all unserved and underserved locations across the state. We had a webinar yesterday that talked through the process for replying to the request for input, but there's another webinar next Tuesday at 10 a.m. If you are interested in attending, I'll get you on that invite. There's a website that kind of lays out everything in more detail with the relevant links. But basically, there's a layer on our map online. You can also download the data, and you can look at PAUs of interest. And then we ask that providers or those interested in participating in the subgrantee process tell us which PAUs they might be interested in, or give feedback on why a PAU should be broken in half. That could be because there's a geographic feature making it hard to cover, locations on both sides of a stream, for example, that we might not have captured. And so we ask for that feedback through an Excel document, and then there's a submission form online. We're having office hours every Monday through the end of this RFI period, Mondays 9 to 10 a.m. on Zoom. And again, that's to help people workshop the documents. Outside of the RFI, I think if the RFI process is more technical than your level of involvement, this bottom part is most important. So start building relationships with providers. The BEAD scoring application formula will emphasize and reward local coordination. Start thinking about workforce development. So, if you're working with a provider, how are they going to incorporate training, apprenticeships, local community benefits, things like that. And then just look out for webinars and technical assistance sessions throughout all of these stages in the process. Connect Illinois round 3 is still accepting applications on a rolling basis. So we're almost at July 1, but if this is something that you or someone had been working on, there is still a chance to apply. And with that, I just wanted to touch upon RDOF briefly, because I know it's been a frequent sort of topic of conversation. And right off the bat, there is not an easy answer here, but I thought I could at least offer some of the basics, at least in my understanding. And then I'll open it up for questions. So RDOF stands for the Rural Development Opportunity Funds. It's a 2020 FCC program that aimed to connect rural areas to fiber, and did this through a reverse bidding process, meaning that applicants who offered the lowest bids typically won the work. So this is, a big topic of conversation and news right now, because What I have read is that experts have said that providers, their business models, their capability to undertake large-scale implementations may not have been properly vetted prior to award, leading them to default or claim that they cannot meet their RDOF commitments. And you can see this 4 years later. I think only 5 to 6 have been spent, so small progress has been made. Some of this could be due to increased costs, kind of post-pandemic inflation, but others do seem to be reckoning with the consequences of underbidding. So essentially, based on NTIA statute, locations that have an enforceable commitment are not eligible for BEAD. They are considered served because an enforceable commitment is a contractual obligation to cover a location with that 100/20 speeds for broadband. Where the challenge comes into play is that if an RDOF award makes a BSL ineligible for BEAD, but that RDOF project does not come to fruition, then this location misses out on BEAD. So, of course, not something that we would ever want to happen. I just wanted to point out that there are downsides to letting RDOF awardees off the hook. So there's a lot of talk right now about amnesty, partial amnesty, and just a couple of points to point out. So setting a precedent for kind of reneging or going back on a grant award commitment, it sets a bad precedent. How do we kind of handle this in the future if we're in a similar situation? Opening up these locations to BEAD funding would certainly be great, but there needs to be a plan for how funding is going to go to the states to accommodate these additional locations. The last thing we want is same amount of money, more locations to cover, and watering down the impact of BEAD and that sort of mandate to try and use fiber wherever possible. So happy to kind of have one-off conversations about this to try and problem solve and understand how it might impact your locations, but at the very least, just wanted to kind of lay out those key points for consideration. All right, so next steps. We have a new intake form where we are kind of collecting contact information about all of our partners and categorizing folks by their areas of interest. So please fill that out. I'll put the link in the chat, and this will help make sure you get all of the right content relevant to you and your community. We also have, of course, the Broadband Connections newsletter, and then lots of social media and Facebook pages. So I will pause there and see if there are any questions.
Hey, Devin, thank you so much for that. A lot of work has happened to get ready for this and still huge amounts to go. So what, in terms of these project areas, what do you anticipate for those? Are there going to be 500 project areas in Illinois, or are they going to be, is the county going to be the area?
Yeah, so I would encourage, and Bill, you are welcome. Yeah, you're welcome to join the webinars as well. But I can share, this is like what we're looking at with project area units. So you can see they're a collection of these BSLs. Each dot is a location. And so the project area unit is essentially like the cluster of locations. And I think I have some numbers on here. Okay, I don't. If you, actually, you know what? I do think I have some slides up from the webinar yesterday, and I can share those numbers. Hold on. But that's a great question.
Yeah. Can you just speak more generally? Because I know we do have another speaker, and I know you have to head off someplace as well. So I guess it's going to be, do you anticipate sub-county kind of areas, or like 100 houses in a cluster, or 1,000? What should people be thinking about?
Yeah, so as of our current analysis, and again, this is completely subject to change based on the results of the challenge process and other, but there are right now 4,400 project area units, with around 24 is the median number of unserved and underserved locations within one project area unit.
Okay. Man, that's good luck. And so there's a question, the July 1st application deadline, that's for the remaining Connect Illinois Round 3 application, correct?
Correct.
And
Yeah.
then the project funds then will be project area, that those dollars will be applied for in the fall, essentially. Is that
Yeah.
beginning in the fall?
Mm-hmm. So round 3 is kind of pre-BEAD. The existing kind of rules and regulations from the Capital Projects Fund. And then if July 1st is too soon for you to participate, then I suggest paying really close attention to the BEAD process and participating in the subgrantee process. Like you said, that will start likely in early fall,
Okay. And
which
then
is
there's a question
considered
about,
round 4.
yeah, the hard to serve designation and poverty levels is a part of that hard to serve designation. And then additional, as you look at that, there's a question about can they submit additional data and information about the poverty levels or social equity issues?
Yeah, I mean, my first reaction is this is not set in stone yet, and so I think feedback is welcome. The template is basically you have to indicate there's like a PAU ID and then an opportunity for saying, do you want to, might you be interested in it? Yes, no, partial with feedback there. So you can probably like rejigger the spreadsheet to provide that feedback or send it to me in an email and I'll pass it along to the team.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Devin, that was really informative and I appreciate the straightforward nature of that. And a lot of it is what we've been telling these communities, since the beginning of this program is get prepared, build relationships with provider partners, and when the money door opens, be ready to jump through.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Exactly.
that a good summary?
For sure. Yeah. I think like being a part of this cohort is a great first step because you're essentially like educating yourself on all of this, and rather than letting broadband happen to you, you're being proactive to find a provider and a like long-term plan that brings benefits to your communities. So it's complex for sure. You want to make sure that you find a provider that is strong and, can make a great case for why they'll be a strong BEAD applicant. But I think there's an opportunity to play for a role in the forefront proactively to work with them on that. And then like showing local coordination during the BEAD process, letters of support, like meaningful letters of support, is going to be really strong.
Okay, that sounds good. So as a community, the PAUs, it seems like to a community, maybe there's not that much that the PAUs might be more of an engineering consideration as opposed to social and so if they look at the PAUs in their county, they're able to say, oh, well, I'm wondering what reasons would be for the community want those PAUs to be changed in some way. Do you have a feel for that?
Yeah, I would say it is mostly like a more technical engineering ask. What we're really looking for is the way that we're dividing up or that we're proposing to divide up the locations. We want to make sure it makes sense for the physical implementation and deployment. And so if you look at some of the reasons that are listed in the template, we want to know, is there a geographic feature that we're not aware of that would prevent a provider from serving this location and this location? They're
Like a
close
bridge
together.
or a railroad or
Right. Railroads is something we're really interested in hearing about. And also, so like a co-op might only have really strict boundaries. And so we want to avoid making it so, someone would need to go into a different co-op's territory and they wouldn't actually be able to. We are interested in sort of competitive trends. I think that's not going to drive us to change anything, but it's just good sort of insight to have.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. That's because our communities are ready to go. So I don't want them to kind of go down a rabbit hole where it's not that big a thing for them to worry about. So
Yeah, I would say like this is more of a provider exercise or a technical team that is working closely with a provider. So if anything, push this opportunity to providers who you think you may want to work with or who are interested in the applying for BEAD funds.
good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
I know Hillary put some links in the chat. If you are in, Bill, I'll send you information because I want to make sure that folks can get onto the webinar next week if they are interested. So
Okay.
I'll send you some links and maybe you can send that around.
Sounds good. We'll definitely do that.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Next up is Richard Martin from USDA Rural Development. And Richard has joined us multiple times to help explain the suite of USDA programs that they have available for broadband. The reason we have any phone service at all in rural America is because of the Department of Agriculture and their long-term support now, 75 years or so of funding telecommunications services in rural areas. So this need for subsidy for rural broadband, for rural telephones is nothing new. And USDA has been the big leader in that over the decades. And so they have a variety of programs we're going to hear about. And the folks who do these programs, they're not making it up as they go along. They've got real established programs and rules and processes. And most of the best provider partners that you might be talking to are well familiar with USDA programs. Richard, welcome. We'll get your presentation up here. Reed's got that going. So welcome, sir.
Thank you, Bill. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you and your group here. It's pretty exciting what's going on out in rural America right now. I can tell you, you indicated that that the USDA has been on the front end of helping to bring telecommunications to rural America for decades now, as well as the electrification of rural America as well. I like to tell the story about my father. Well, my father tells the story, and I repeat it. When he was a child, he would go with my grandparents to my great grandparents' house in a small county in Tennessee, and on the weekends to visit. And at the time, this was in the early 40s, there was no electricity, and so when it got dark, they would pull out the kerosene lamps and so forth. And over the years, electricity came to their area and kind of changed the dynamics, I guess, of life in rural America for them. Telecommunications, telephones, as well as the electricity, really brought the world to rural America. And so what's happening now in the on the broadband side, it's kind of this a very similar situation where areas that have not been served for broadband purposes are now kind of lighting it up and now basically connecting with the rest of the world in a lot of respects. And so it's very exciting what's going on, and I'm happy to be a part of it. Again, I'm Richard Martin. I'm the Illinois and Indiana General Field Representative, overseeing those two states. I live just outside of Indianapolis, but I do quite a bit of work in Illinois, as we have a number of projects that are going on right now in the broadband realm. Next slide, please. So a general field representative, which is my position at this time, basically we're national office personnel, and we provide program and project administration, origination of applications, servicing of funding through project completion, and overall oversight. We actually act as a liaison, basically between between the co-ops, the awardees, and the national office, and then the contractors and engineers that are overseeing their projects. So we kind of we're kind of we have our hands in a lot of different buckets, quite frankly, and but we were very instrumental in overseeing these projects and seeing them come to fruition. That is my contact information right there. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me, email or my cell phone there as well. So next slide, please. So the rural development basically has three agencies with unique programs and objectives. Rural utility services is really who I'm working with, but we also have rural housing service and rural business cooperative services as well. Over these three agencies, RD does administer over 40 programs, and the electric and telecommunications programs are administered by the national office. So I basically report to Washington on this. Next slide, please. So to go back into history a little bit, like I said, REA program, the Rural Electrification Administration program, was created in 1935 and provided financing to promote rural electrification in rural America. In 49, they received the authority to finance telephone services in rural communities, and then in 95, evolving from that, RUS required all financed telecommunications networks to have the capacity to deliver broadband. So from 2010 to the present, we've approved nearly 10.4 billion. That number is growing, probably as I say this, in loans and grants to build out broadband infrastructure and expand distance learning and telemedicine services in rural areas. Actually, I was hired in November of 2009 as part of the Obama administration's broadband stimulus program, and it was I think close to $1 billion of stimulus monies that were trying to help America recover from the deep recession that we were in at the time. And we did start it was called the BIP program, Broadband Initiatives Program. And it was kind of a precursor to one of the programs that I'll be getting into here in just a moment. We learned a lot from that program, and like I said, we have, I wouldn't say perfected, but we learned a lot and learned what not to do in a lot of regards as far as administering these loans and grants. Next slide, please. So the funding for rural broadband is kind of broken down into several different sub-programs, and so we have the telecommunications infrastructure loan program, which has traditionally been basically your telephone services, and like I said, there was an expansion into broadband from that over in the last 25 years or so. The Rural Broadband Program, Community Connect Grant Program, and the Reconnect Program are all we're currently administering those. Actually, the Rural Broadband Program, which we'll see here in just a moment, is currently on a hiatus, but due to the Reconnect Program taking center charge on this. Next slide, please. So to go into a little bit of overview of the telecommunications program, the purpose of which is to provide loan and grant funding to expand broadband networks, primarily serving rural residents. The big cities have, they already have theirs going on, but rural America really has been behind the eight ball and or really behind the times, and so we're trying to bring them back up to speed, so to speak. Eligible entities are state and local governments, tribal entities, nonprofits, for-profits, LLCs, and partnerships. We deal quite a bit with local cooperatives, both telephone and electric cooperatives as well. Eligible projects are based on regulation and funding announcements, which come out periodically. These are financially and technically feasible and meets non-duplication requirements. We don't want to overstep other bounds, I guess, as it relates to these projects, and so we have to make sure that that we're not duplicating services and thereby wasting a lot of taxpayer dollars. Application periods, except for the infrastructure programs, applications are accepted during annual periods based on release of funding announcements. Next slide, please. So to go into the telecommunications infrastructure program, which is a loan program, next slide, please. You can kind of see from some of this, from some of the numbers that are being presented here, a lot of money has been available over the years, but hasn't really been. We really haven't had a lot of applications for infrastructure loans, and that's largely due to, in my mind, like I said, the Broadband Initiatives program took center stage in a lot of respects, and now the Reconnect program, which we will see here a little bit later, that has been the driving force for us right now. But we do have applications coming in for infrastructure loans, and these do, like I said, they do include broadband services as well. So it covers several areas, I guess. But right now, the applications are accepted year round. They are submitted through the application intake system through Salesforce online, and there are no funding thresholds that I'm aware of at this time. Primarily benefits communities of less than 5,000 residents, and these are loans and loan guarantees. Next slide, please. So the standard loan terms are a 2-year principal deferral. The interest rate is at the cost of money. So whatever the interest rates are at the time that the advances are made is what they get locked in at. The interest rates that they get locked in. And right now, it's obviously the interest rates are a little higher than they have been in the past, and so to the extent that a lot of these organizations are looking for the grant dollars, the free dollars, interest rates are definitely affecting the desire, I guess, to take out some of these loans. But again, it is a flexible program, and so to that extent, there's not any competition for those dollars. But it does take a while for these applications to go through the system. It's a very extensive process, and it can be a little painful sometimes. But the loan maturity is the life of the facilities that are financed plus 3 years, and we can assist and review applications before submission. And when it says staff, the GFRs and other staff from the national office can assist as well. Next slide, please. So next, I'll be talking a little bit about the rural broadband program, which is there's not a lot to talk about at this time. But next slide, please. There has traditionally been quite a bit of money that was available over the years 2019 and 20, and then it started dropping off in 21 and 22. Currently, applications are not being accepted for this program. And the program is closed at this time and will open when a funding opportunity announcement is published. So I won't belabor the point here. Like I said, it's not currently open, and so we'll just move on to the next slide. Next slide, please. Because we'll talk about the Community Connect program real quickly, which is a grant program. Next slide. Applications are not currently being accepted at this time. The application period did close in February, on February 20th. There will be another opportunity for Community Connect grants, probably later this year, early next year. I'm not exactly sure when that opportunity will open back up, but it is an annual type program, and we're currently we're currently reviewing the applications that were made up through February 20th. It is a grant program. It's for populations areas with less than 20,000. Funding thresholds are 100,000 to 5 million. There is a matching requirement of 15%, and the broadband service speeds are 10.1, and the grant speed is 25/3. So what happens with this program is there is a build out process that goes out into the communities, and then for a period of 2 years, there's a requirement for the awarded entity to create a facility where residents can go to and use the computers for resumes, for job applications, tests, learning from schools, that type of thing. So for areas that are being built out during the process of the grant period, residents have a place that they can go and actually connect with the outside world. And so this is and after the 2-year period is up, where they have built out their system and had the community center in place for 2 years, they are able to shut down that community center. But at that point, the community is connected, or at least has the opportunity to connect to the grid. So you can see where we've had and a growing number of appropriations that have been made available to us. It's a very popular program, and like I said, the applications are currently under review for the current fiscal year. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the Community Connect application process. They are submitted electronically through through a new online application system through Salesforce. Resources are available there, and these slides will be made available to all participants on today's call. Contact information is as noted there. So next slide, please. And again, it's closed at this time. It closed at 11:59 a.m. on February 20th. But if you go to the USDA RD website, if you go under the programs, you can see the different programs that we offer. Very extensive amounts of information. You can see where you have an overview and how to apply, other requirements, contact information, events, where you can sign up for webinars or Q&A questions where, for potential applicants, have some questions where they can call in, or they can ask, interactively ask questions along the way. It's very it's a very extensive website that we offer that and it should answer a good bit of your questions, but obviously to the extent that I'm available and other staff are available along the way, we're happy to help. So next slide, please. So under the Community Connect program, there is the SEDC, Strategic Economic and Community Development, Community Connect grant is participating in this program. It supports projects that promote and implement strategic community investment ideas, or investment plans, excuse me. And these plans offer or use the unique strengths of rural communities to advance prosperity. We help to develop these projects to build community prosperity using community assets, identifying resources, and convening partners, and leveraging federal, state, and local or private funding. It does provide to set aside amounts for SEDC applications, and the eligibilities are still applied to the projects. And it provides applicants for additional scoring points along the way, so that they're able to take advantage of this in the point process. Because when you're applying for these grants or where you're applying for these grants, there is a scoring process, and so to the extent that you can take advantage of every scoring opportunity out there, then the better. So next slide, please.
Hey, Richard.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to make a couple points here. One is these SEDS, and maybe you can talk about that a little bit more. I guess I've been around so long, they used to call them the OEDP, but now the SEDS and now the SECD, but it's kind of the Regional Economic Development Plan that the regional planning COGS kind of take on and submit to EDA and so on. Is that the plan you're talking about, or is that a different?
I believe so. I'll be honest with you. I'm not exactly. I'm not as well versed on this particular aspect of it as maybe I should be, and I apologize for that. But
no, that's okay. Hey, and then the second, but my main point is that if you really want to get USDA funds, you can't wait until a program is announced and then think you're going to put together the good application. It's great to get your ducks in a line and know what these programs are. So when the application window opens, you're kind of ready to go. And
that's true. That's true. You really need to have, and I'm not going to say that you need a professional grant writer. It does help sometimes, especially, there are obviously instances where people have applied for these grants through other agencies and so forth, and they understand the process. Having a grant writer along the way is a definite plus. Like you said, I mean, right now we have probably, I would say, a good 7, 8, 9 months between now and the next opportunity. But if you could go ahead and start laying the groundwork for your application today or soon, you can you really eliminate a lot of headache at the end, because trying to submit an application at the deadline is not recommended. You really want to submit it earlier than the deadline. That way, if you run into some glitches in the system, or you've left out some information that you need to go back and add or so forth, then you can do that. So
yeah, I have that personal experience of missing a form.
I bet.
that's the end of it, right, Ken? I mean, there's past the deadlines, that's
Unfortunately,
it, so.
yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the times, if your application is missing a form or is deficient, then there is no remedy for it after it's closed out, after the opportunity is closed. And sometimes there is an opportunity where you can clarify something, but like you said, if you're missing something, then it's deemed to be deficient, and they'll move on. So next slide, please. So let's talk about distance learning and telemedicine real quick. This is obviously a grant program as well. Applications are not being accepted currently. The period just closed 2 weeks ago, actually, April 29th. We're in the process of reviewing applications that were received. Very, very popular program. It's helping out a lot of people. It's basically connecting rural America with and rural students with teaching and learning opportunities, and also with medicine and medical assistance as well. To the extent that people live so far away from hospitals or their physicians, they can connect with the telemedicine aspect, to a physician, online, and get much better care. Same thing with learning opportunities with not only elementary schools, high schools, and colleges, junior colleges, and so forth. So yeah, this is a very popular program. We received a ton of applications. I think we had $60 million that was available, and we had in 2023 we received 288 applications for 170 million, and only but we only had 121 million available. So there was a lot of there were some that were left out. Let's put it that way. They're left out of the process. So it is a competitive situation, and as Bill indicated, the better you can tweak your application, then you stand a much better chance of getting one of these grants. The funding threshold is a 50,000 to 1 million. There is a matching requirement of 15%. And it must include a hub and an end user site. So there needs to be a central location where the information is being disseminated from, and then the end user sites are, whether it be a school, a classroom, or a physician's office in a rural area. That's kind of how this works. Next slide, please. So to go into the definitions a little bit, distance learning, it means the interactive delivery of curriculum via telecommunications, and promotes the connection of students and teachers at remote sites. And essentially what we're funding here is equipment. We're not funding labor. We're not funding teachers themselves. We're not funding supplies and so forth, but we are funding equipment, and to the extent that this equipment is able to connect the hub to the end user. And telemedicine is a real-time interactive telecommunications link to an end user from medical professionals at separate sites in order to exchange healthcare information for the purposes of providing improved healthcare services to residents of rural areas. And this is a time-saving issue. This is a cost-saving issue. Travel costs for a person in a rural community to travel to a bigger city and having to spend money on gas and hotel rooms and so forth. This is really offering an opportunity to connect with healthcare providers without significant costs. And so again, this is a very popular program, and we're happy to offer it. Next slide, please. So now we get into the Reconnect program, which is the Mac Daddy right now. That's what we're really focused on. Not to say that we're not giving attention to the distance learning and Community Connect, because we are. But right now, Reconnect is really front and center, and we're in the middle of round 5 now. Next slide, please. So this program purpose, it does provide loans, grants, and loan grant combinations. So there's 100% loans, 100% grants, and then a 50-50 loan grant combination. And it's to provide high-speed internet to rural areas that lack sufficient access to broadband. And so the funds that we're offering can be used to fund the cost of construction improvement or acquisition of facilities and equipment needed to provide broadband service. The FOA announcement, and that stands for Funding Opportunity. There we go. The Funding Opportunity announcement establishes broadband eligibility speeds, scoring criteria, project and funding requirements for the application period, and other FOA requirements based on the reference from 7 CFR 1740. So if you're really looking to cure some insomnia where you just can't sleep, pull out 7 CFR 1740 and just kind of read through it. It'll put you right to sleep. But the applications are made through the online portal, which is www.usda.gov/reconnect, and it is through Tuesday, May 21st. And so we've got basically 1 week left in the current application process, and make sure that if there's anyone out there that is submitting an application at this time or about to submit an application, make sure that you have that 11:59 a.m. time in play instead of 11:59 p.m. If you get it in on May 21st at 11:59 p.m., you're going to be late and it's not going to work. And that's unfortunate, but we need to make sure that it's just before noon instead of just before midnight. Next slide, please. So there is a 3-year principal and interest deferment on loan funds, 5-year construction period. The applications do require annual and unqualified comparative audits for eligibility. So a mom and pop organization that doesn't have an outside comparative audit is not going to be able to apply for these loans or grants. The FOA it contains important eligibility scoring and application requirements for the funding window, and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act did authorize $2 billion for additional Reconnect funding in rounds 3 and 4. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, we have 3 different types of funding. We got 100% grant, 100% loan, and a 50-50 loan grant combination. We do have 100% grants for tribal governments, Alaska Native corporations, colonious, persistent poverty areas, and socially vulnerable communities. There is in the current award period, there is $150 million total available. There is a $25 million maximum, and this is in the 100% grant. There is a competitive review based on scoring criteria and a 25% cash match requirement, so you have to spend your match first before you can get the grant dollars. In the loan grant combination, which is a 50-50, $200 million is available, $25 million maximum per project, or for the grant or the loan. and then the loan grant amounts will always be equal. A competitive review based on scoring criteria. Interest rates are set at the U.S. Treasury rate at the time of each advance of funds. So as the interest rates go up and down, and as you make advances on the loans, your interest rate will fluctuate from time to time. 100% loan opportunity is there's 150 million available, 50 million maximum. The quicker you get the applications in, and we may have exhausted the total amount that's available for the 100% loan with a week to go. But the interest rate is attractive, and it's fixed at 2%. So the competitive aspect of this is that, you know, everybody wants the 100% grant money. I mean, that's free money, and it's 100%, you know, 100% free, and you know, everybody wants that, and that is attractive, and I get that. But at the same time, there is a high degree of competitiveness for those funds. To a lesser extent, the loan grant combination it's also very popular. 50% grant is certainly nothing to sneeze at, and so that there is a lot of competition for those dollars. But the 100% loan, very attractive at 2%, and it's, instead of having to go through the infrastructure program and the process of applying for one of those loans, you can get one of these loans at 2%, and that's really, really nice. I won't go into the other areas or the other actually under the persistent poverty areas and socially vulnerable communities. There is some aspects of that could relate to rural Illinois, and I think there are extra points that are available for those areas. Next slide, please. So you can see in the first 4 rounds, we're currently the round that we're currently in the process of taking applications for is round 5. But in the first 4 rounds, we had you can see the number of applications, the requested amounts, and then the number of awards with the amounts of the awards that were awarded. So you can see it's growing each time, and so you can also see where, you know, we had we only awarded 1.8 million in round 4, but we had 4.4 million, which was requested. So clearly there is a demand for our product or for our dollars. And there is, and unfortunately, there are a number of entities that, you know, I'm sure that there's a lot of entities that make very good applications, but for whatever reason in the scoring process didn't score enough points to get the award. And in that respect, maybe they would have the opportunity to go to the Illinois Office of Broadband with what some of the programs that Devin was talking about, and getting loans or grants, or getting grants through them instead. So we don't want to leave anybody out, but unfortunately, you know, our hands are tied. Excuse me. And as far as the amount of money that we have available to lend out or to give out. Next slide, please. So here are some resources that we have available that you can connect to, and it provides a wealth of information about our programs. Next slide, please. Additional resources as well. We have telecommunications, Illinois Broadband Lab, Build America, Buy America Act, and that's an important part of the process. Rural development, e-connectivity, and the GFR and state offices. There's general field representatives like myself in each state. Some of us oversee multiple states, and some of us only oversee one state. But we are available to help, and the broadband, I mean the GFR map will show who is available in each state. I'm not sure if you guys have some affiliations with maybe some organizations in Missouri or Indiana or Arkansas, some of the surrounding states, I guess. You can see who is covering those states and get the contact information for them as well. So next slide, please. Some historical numbers. Next slide. You can see that we've basically given out to Illinois residents or Illinois projects serving Illinois residents. There's a typo there. It should be 399 million. It's in the heading there. It should be 399. So. But the infrastructure program is over 153 million. Reconnect has now exceeded the infrastructure program and will continue that way. And then distance learning and telemedicine 18.2, Community Connect 7, and broadband initiatives, which I spoke about earlier. That was the broadband stimulus program under the Obama administration. That was about 10 million. Next slide, please. Does anybody have any questions based on the information I've presented?
Richard, the types of companies, telecom companies that you usually work with are traditional rural telephone companies. Is that the majority of projects that are funded through those, or
yes,
do
sir.
other types of companies apply as well?
There are other applicants that can apply, but those are the ones that I deal with personally, are traditional electric and telephone cooperatives. And surprisingly, there are a number of electric cooperatives that are getting into the broadband programs, and so there is equal access, I guess, to them as well. But yes, I do deal with a number of telephone cooperatives in the Illinois area, and a gentleman named Joe Guilford, who is another GFR. He oversees some other area or some other cooperatives in Illinois as well that I do not oversee, but we've got it covered, and yeah, that's who we're dealing with, and again, to get a reconnect loan or grant, like I said, you have to have comparative annual audits from outside CPA firms, and so that unfortunately for a small organization eliminates the opportunities for some of those that might want to get into the system and make an application. But I think that we learned some painful lessons through the broadband initiatives program back in 2010 or so, and so we kind of stepped up our requirements a little bit to eliminate some potential pitfalls that would come along with company lesser established companies, I guess.
Yeah, I understand that. So, well, that's very helpful. So as communities, my recommendation is to look at these programs, look at the eligibility maps, Reconnect and Community Connect, and for those two programs in particular, and see if you have eligible areas, and then begin to work with a provider partner to figure out how can we make best use of that program. The distance learning and telemedicine program, that can work in conjunction with other broadband initiatives as well that we talked about. That's why we ask you to have healthcare providers, educators, public safety on your team, because you can mix and match, so sometimes the timing is a little too exciting, to hope that the dollars come in and hope that's part of your project, but to strategically think about linking those things for better connectivity.
Bill, the DLT program, and maybe I should have mentioned this. The typical organizations that I'm dealing with here with that program are more of the hospitals and school districts
Mm-hmm.
and universities, and so
Yeah.
I'm dealing with them, primarily for that program alone.
And that's kind of a lot of times that's regional networking.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So that can be helpful for our counties. Richard, thank you so much for the presentation today. It was, as always, detailed and understandable. I encourage communities to use Richard as the gateway. He can, sometimes they say they're gatekeepers, but I think they're the ones who can open the door for folks to really understand these programs, what's a fundable project, and strategically really plan out your project so that it is fundable. Because you don't want to apply and not get funding, because it's a lot of work to apply.
That's true. That's very true. And yeah, we would we'll do everything we can to help you with the parameters that given that we can. But I do appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys today. And like I said, the information or my contact information is in the presentation. And feel free to reach out at any time.
Great. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
So good. We've gone a little longer than we usually do on these, but the funding is such a critical part to understand how to access resources that we traditionally go longer on this session. So really now we're in this home stretch of our program, the final weeks. So it's a question of how to get one more push for the surveys, talk about any results you've had from your broadband provider interviews and next steps on that, or chasing down providers you haven't reached yet, and be working on those kind of things. So Reed or Nancy, if you want to open up the breakout rooms, and if anyone has any questions or wants Reed or I or Nancy to come into your break room, let us know, and we'll go from there. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Richard.